Hi movie fans! In today's synopsis, we will be looking at The Usual Suspects from 1995. Let us know what you think in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more. Last night in San Pedro Harbor, on a boat, an injured man lights a trail of gas. Before the flames get to their destination, another man pisses on the fire, putting it out. He walks down to the man, past a body with a knife in its back. The fire starter says he can't feel his legs. He then appears to shoot the man twice, then sets the ship on fire. A man called Verbal is giving a statement to government officials. He mentions a voice was heard during a truck heist in Queens 6 weeks ago in New York. On the back of this voice, a number of known suspects are picked up. Michael McManus is first, then Todd Hockney, next is Fred Fenster, and finally, shady ex-cop Dean Keaton is picked up by U.S. Customs Special Agent Dave Cugin during a meeting. All the suspects, including low-level criminal Verbal, who suffers from cerebral palsy, are put in a lineup. They must step forward and read the line, but mostly mess around and joke. Verbal narrates that it was a mistake to put those guys together. Who knows what could happen? One by one they get interrogated. McManus, the entryman, is first. They try to get Fenster to roll, but he is a solid guy who works with McManus regularly. Hockney, an explosives expert, wants his lawyer and doesn't care about anything. Keaton says he will beat any charges as he is straight now. All the suspects are being held in the same cell. They get to talking and Keaton says something is not adding up. They don't put 5 felons in the same lineup. Hockney wants to know who Verbal is. Keaton says he has seen him before in county. Verbal says he was in for fraud. McManus says he has a job they may be interested in, which they are, except for Keaton, who says he wants nothing to do with any of them. Verbal narrates that is how it started, with trumped-up charges. Present day at San Pedro. FBI agent Jack Bear is told there are 15 bodies so far, but more in the water, and that there are 2 survivors. One is in a coma in county hospital and another is a cripple, his words not mine, from New York. The agent leaves. In the distance, another body is floating in the bay. At the San Pedro Police Department, Dave Cugin is being told by Jeff Rabin that Verbal's lawyer has got him an immunity deal for a statement and a misdemeanor 2 weapons charge. Rabin says that it has got political and Verbal is protected.
From up on high by the Prince of Darkness.
Dave insists on seeing Verbal. Rabin says Verbal won't agree if he is recorded, if at all. He has full immunity and doesn't know anything. Dave says it is not an interrogation, just a chat, and they can do it in Rabin's office. He wants to know why 27 people are dead, where the drugs are, and if Dean Keaton is really dead. At County Hospital, Agent Jack Bear tells them to put security on the door. The burn victim starts talking in Hungarian and then keeps banging on about
Keyser Söze!
Bear says into the phone to get Dave Cugin. Verbal is now in Rabin's office. Cugin starts asking Verbal about the lineup in New York. Rabin goes to get coffee first while Cugin and Verbal chat. He says he knows Verbal is a short con operator and has a soft spot for Keaton, who is a POS. Cugin tells Verbal he is smarter than him and will get what he wants to know, like it or not. Rabin is back with the coffee and it's back to the lineup. Keaton's lawyer girlfriend, Edie Finneran, gets them out of jail and is pissed. Keaton is more upset with his business partners who will get cold feet. He says the police will always be after him. He says his life was ruined in there. He notices the rest of the crew loitering and looking at him. Verbal narrates that McManus and Fenster had a high-stakes job that needs 5 people to be clean, meaning Verbal needs to convince Keaton. Verbal tells Keaton about the job. It's a heist on an illegal police escort for an emerald smuggler. Verbal needs Keaton to go or Verbal will be out. He says it's a way to stick it to the cops. Verbal says he has a way to do the job with no one getting killed. $3 million and no one gets killed. Keaton is in. The cops pick up the smuggler and take him to Staten Island. On the journey, they get boxed in by vans and held up at gunpoint. They hand over the emeralds and the cash packet. McManus then pours fuel over the car and lights it as they drive off. Keaton rubs it in by calling the press and causing a shitstorm in which almost 20 cops went down. McManus says they snatched more than he thought. He then says that he has to go to Cali to see the fence. The others are not happy with him going with the haul. They all decide to take a trip to Cali, where they can lay low. Cugin asks Rabin to leave the room for a moment. He tells Verbal that he knows Keaton is still crooked and he was investigated for 3 murders while still a cop. While in Sing Sing, he killed 3 prisoners. He also says Keaton was dead. He died in a fire when he was investigating the murder of a witness testifying against him. 2 people saw him go into a building just before it blew up. Those 2 died in strange circumstances within 3 months. At the hospital, they now have an interpreter asking what happened in the shootout. The man tells them they were not buying dope but people. He says he saw the devil and looked him in the eye. They ask him who the devil is and he says,
Keyser Söze.
They get him to describe Keyser Söze to the sketch artist. Cugin tells Verbal that he got a tip-off that Keaton was eating with his attorney. Due to technicalities, they had to leave him. He was dead just long enough for the murder charge to disappear. Cugin tells Verbal he doesn't believe he saw Keaton die and Keaton set the whole thing up. Verbal says a lawyer called Kobayashi was behind it all, not Keaton. Cugin says,
And tell me every last detail.
The crew meets with McManus' fence Redfoot in Cali. Redfoot asks if they are looking for more work and McManus is on it, but Keaton says, We're on vacation. Redfoot tells them about the job, cash, and jewels, to security. They keep the cash, Redfoot gets the jewels, McManus says he will think about it. Verbal says it took 1 day of McManus nagging for Keaton to get on board. The robbery goes down in a parking garage. The Mark gets in his car and pulls a gun on Keaton, which causes havoc. McManus shoots both bodyguards and Verbal executes the Mark. They grab the loot and escape. Once they crack open the briefcase, they find they have robbed a load of heroin, not jewels. They meet up with Redfoot. McManus wants to kill him, but Keaton says he will deal with it. Redfoot says it isn't his fault. Some limey lawyer got him the job. Keaton says he wants to meet the lawyer, and Redfoot says he wants to meet you too. Cugin asks Verbal why he didn't tell the DA about Kobayashi, but before he can answer, Cugin goes out to see Jack Bear. Bear says to stop looking for coke. It was the Hungarian mob dealing with Argentinians, but nobody knows what the cash was for, but it wasn't drugs. He asks if Verbal mentioned Keyser Söze and explains who he is. Cugin storms in and asks,
Who's Keyser Söze?
The guys are waiting to meet with Kobayashi. Kobayashi shows and says his employer has a proposal for them. 1 day's work is very dangerous and the employer doesn't expect them all to live, but they can split the $91 million how they see fit. Keaton asks who his boss is, and he says,
I work for Keyser Söze.
They all go quiet except Verbal, who asks,
Who's Keyser Söze?
Kobayashi says it is actually in order. He lists the times the crew members inadvertently stole from Keyser Söze and that he set up the lineup, but Keaton's lawyer got them out too quickly. He says they owe Keyser Söze or they will die. Hagmi pulls a gun on Kobayashi and tells him to prove it. Kobayashi says it doesn't matter as he can frame them for the murder of Saul for the heroin. Redfoot will testify how he is told. Keyser Söze's business is drugs and he is competing with Argentinians. He wants the crew to destroy the Argentinian shipment on the boat. He leaves them a briefcase with dossiers on each of them showing there isn't anything about them they don't know. Verbal explains to Cugin what he knows about Keyser Söze. He tells a story where Keyser Söze kills his own wife and children so some Hungarian mobsters could not use them for leverage. Once they are buried, he kills all the mobsters' families, friends, and anyone associated with them, and then he is gone. Verbal tells Cugin that he will never find Keyser Söze.
What happened next?
The next morning, Finster was gone. McManus was furious and wanted to off him. That night, Kobayashi called saying where to find Finster's body. Keaton decides that they are going to kill Kobayashi. They kill 2 of Kobayashi's bodyguards and take him hostage. Keaton tells him to call the job off, but Kobayashi's employer is steadfast. Keaton gives the nod to kill Kobayashi, but Kobayashi says he has epinephrine in his office. They go and see that Kobayashi is not bluffing. Kobayashi tells them to clean up the bodies downstairs and get ready for the boat or else. They scope out the job and agree it is almost impossible, but they agree to wait for the money, which means 10 more people. It's the big night and they are getting in position. A van arrives with the cash and more foot soldiers. McManus is ready on a rooftop with a sniper rifle. Keaton tells Verbal not to come and deliver a message to Edie instead. Keaton makes his way along the gangway to the boat. Hockney plants a diversionary bomb and walks to the boat. The bomb goes off and the shooting starts. When the shooting stops, Keaton and McManus board and start clearing the boat. Hockney goes to the van and opens a box. He is shot in the back and dies. Verbal tells Cugin he froze up. Cugin gets pulled next door. He is told they found the body of an Argentinian who was shot in the head twice. This man made a deal to turn state's evidence against 50 people, including Keyser Söze. When Cugin goes back, he tells Verbal that he knows there was no dope on the boat. McManus and Keaton keep going on and clearing the boat. There's a man in a room who is visited by a guard. The man says he knows that he is here. He knows that it is
Keyser Söze!
McManus and Keaton meet in the engine room and Keaton tells him there is no coke. McManus says he is gone and bails. A dying guard opens the door to the man's room and the man sees someone and begs him not to kill him. No dice. Keaton is out on deck when McManus walks out and says,
Strangest thing.
then drops dead with a weapon in his neck. Verbal goes to the van and shuts the door and looks for the keys. Keaton is looking over McManus when someone shoots him in the back. In Verbal's statement, he said he saw a man in a suit shoot Keaton. Cugin starts shouting at Verbal, asking if who he saw shoot Keaton was Keyser Söze, and if so, why didn't he tell the DA? Why didn't he try to save Keaton? Verbal says he was scared. Verbal says that he saw the man kill Keaton and set fire to the boat. Cugin asks him if he has heard of Arturo Marquez, the man on the boat. He was able to positively ID Keyser Söze, and his people were selling him to the Hungarians that Keyser Söze tried to wipe out in Turkey. Cugin says Keaton knew who he was, as Edie was his extradition advisor, and says it wasn't a heist, it was a suicide hit to kill the one man who could finger Söze. He says that Keaton was Keyser Söze and set the whole thing up, adding that Edie was found dead with a double tap to the head. Verbal admits that the whole affair, from the beginning, was Keaton's idea. His bail having been posted, Verbal departs with his immunity. Verbal retrieves his personal effects as Cugin notices that details and names from Verbal's story are words appearing on various objects around the room. Redfoot is the name on a wanted poster, and Kobayashi is written on the bottom of a coffee cup that Verbal handled earlier. Quickly putting the pieces together, Cugin realizes that Verbal made up practically the entire story as he talked. He runs outside just as a fax arrives with the police artist's impression of Keyser Söze's face, which resembles Verbal Kint. As he leaves the police station, Verbal's distinctive limp gradually disappears and he shakes out his palsied hand. He steps into a waiting car driven by Mr. Kobayashi, departing just as Cugin comes outside to see that Verbal is gone. If you haven't guessed by now, Verbal Kint is Keyser Söze. Thanks for watching this synopsis of The Usual Suspects. We hope that you have enjoyed it. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do subscribe for more. All the best.